let's talk about how you came to the situation where you are today. So you grew up in Texas initially.
Yes. I was born in Albuquerque.
All right.
But I left when I was 3 or 4 and I moved to Texas.
You moved to Texas, and from early age, were you a pretty smart student and your teachers tell you this, you were good? Or?
I have always been academically smart, and that, by the way, the older I get, I realize how many kinds of smart there are. There are a lot of kinds of smart. There are a lot of kinds of stupid, too. But there are, I see people all the time who I know they wouldn't have gotten A+s on, their calculus exams, but they're incredibly smart. But yes, I was a very good student.
So you ultimately moved to high school in Miami.
Yes.
And then you were valedictorian of your class.
Yes.
You graduated as valedictorian. You decided to go to Princeton. How come you decided to go to Princeton?
Because I wanted to be a theoretical physicist. And so I went to Princeton, and I was a really good student, as I pointed out already. I got A+ on almost everything. I was in the honors physics track, which starts out with 100 students, and by the time you get to quantum mechanics, it's like 30. So I'm in quantum mechanics. I think this is like junior year, and I've also been taking a bunch of computer science classes and electrical engineering classes, which I'm also enjoying. And I can't solve this partial differential equation. It's really, really hard. And I've been studying with my roommate, Joe, who also is really good at math. And the two of us worked on this one homework problem for 3 hours and got nowhere. And we finally said, we looked up at each other over the table at the same moment. We said, Yosanta, because Yosanta was the smartest guy at Princeton. And we went to Yosanta's room, and he was Sri Lankan. And in the Facebook, which was an actual paper book at that time, his name was 3 lines long, because I guess in Sri Lanka, when you do something good for the king, they give you an extra syllable in your name. And so he had a super long last name, the most humble, wonderful guy. And we show him this problem. And he looks at it, he stares at it for a while, and he says, cosine. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that's the answer. And I'm like, that's the answer? And he's like, yeah, let me show you. So he brings us into his room. He sits us down. He writes out 3 pages of detailed algebra. Everything crosses out, and the answer is cosine. And I said, listen, Yosanta, did you just do that in your head? And he said, no, that would be impossible. 3 years ago, I solved a very similar problem, and I was able to map this problem onto that problem, and then it was immediately obvious that the answer was cosine. And that was an important moment for me, because that was the very moment when I realized I was never going to be a great theoretical physicist.
And so by default, I was taking a series of calculus courses, and there were 3 courses, Calc 1, 2, and 3. Now, I don't remember really what happened in Calc 1 and 2, but when I got to Calculus 3, I had a really phenomenal teacher who taught mathematics in a way I had never heard taught before. And he kept emphasizing this idea that I had never heard before, and that's the idea that one does not need to be a genius to do mathematics. And I had never heard anyone say that before. I had never heard anyone describe mathematics in a way that was so engaging and so full of these concepts rather than just formulas or procedures to memorize. So after Calculus 3, I declared physics as my major. But as I asked more and more fundamental questions, I realized it's really the mathematics that I love, those ideas I learned back in Calc 3. So 2 years later, after I finished the physics curriculum, I realized, oh no, there's still so much more to learn. I have to now be a math major. So then I declared a math major. I'm in my early 20s at this point. I stay on it, and I finished that for 2 more years. And then I decide, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn. And then I decide to go to graduate school with it. And so after I declared a math major, and even when I got into graduate school, you can imagine it was difficult personally to not compare, or try not to compare myself with my more experienced classmates. And so Um, I remember, for example, I took an algebra class the first semester of my first year of graduate school. And everything that I knew about group theory from college was covered in the first 3 weeks, right? But there's like 12 more weeks of the semester to go. And as I sort of sat in my chair, all discouraged, and looked around at my classmates, I was thinking, I had the feeling, hey, everyone else seems to be, like this is a walk in the park for them, but I felt like I got hit with a ton of bricks. And so that certainly was a personal struggle of mine, sort of feeling that I was playing catch up. In a sense that I felt I had less experience, and so it's tempting to sort of want to compare yourself to others. So that experience is something that I had very frequently in graduate school. But because of that, I had to learn through those experiences to really persevere and to not look, to the left or right and see what other people are doing, but just to stay focused on my own work, to learn how to be persistent through those trials. But once I figured out what worked for me, I then became, like I got in the groove, and then I was able to catch up as soon as I stopped worrying about other people. And so that, it was a struggle, but I'm actually kind of glad for my unconventional pathway, because this sort of perseverance that I guess I worked on at that time now really informs the way that I work today. And so in that sense, it all worked out great.